Welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And the promise of Shadow Shorts is that every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a conversation, a short conversation, that's Shadow Shorts, but a conversation with an expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation yesterday for a couple of reasons. One, because this topic came out in my graduate level class last night, and two, because I think what we're going to touch on in this conversation is really important when we look at the industry, the profession as a whole, and maybe ask the question, why don't we see more innovation? So I'm joined today by Tom Scarangello. He's the executive chairman at Thornton Tomasetti. Tom, I really appreciate you being here. I've loved the conversations that we've had, and we'll leave baseball out of this because it's a little bit of a sore subject at the moment.
Oh, please do.
But, I'm really looking forward to this conversation about innovation. And resistance to change certainly is a piece of what we'll talk about. But how do we make innovation accessible? How do we make it something that more people can get on board with? So thanks for joining me today, and I'm interested to hear what you think about how we get more people involved.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I've loved the conversation we've had leading up to this, and I love the way you dubbed it approachable innovation, because I think that's the biggest challenge we have right now. If you look at the opportunities for innovation in our industry and true innovation, I don't think certainly in my career, I haven't seen a time where where the breadth, the speed, just the magnitude of opportunities for innovation throughout the whole, kind of asset life cycle, and touching on everybody, not just engineers and architects, but the owners, the contractors, labor. The breadth of what we see out there is at the highest I've ever seen. And it's very different than other periods of innovation that we've had, or I could say the other period of innovation, because I don't think we've had a lot of periods of innovation. And I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing is how to kind of wrap your hands around it, and then how to recognize the challenges to the different types of innovation that opportunities we have. And that's where I feel like I spend and in conversations with you, others are spending a lot of their time, because the opportunities are there, but how do you bring them to bear, and how do you get people to understand the impact and embrace the challenge and the opportunity?
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And before we went live, we talked about this. I mentioned this in the intro, that this question sort of came up with my graduate students last night. And the question was, why don't we see more, right? What's holding, whether it is, like you said, whether it's architects, engineers, contractors, anybody in the CRE world, why don't we see more innovation? And one of, my immediate thought was, well, because again, from, my experience from the architecture point of view is, well, there's so many people in the office that have their heads down. They're focused on, they're focused on the next deadline. Hey, we've got to get this package out by Friday or whatever it is. And I know you had some thoughts on that before we went live. I think there's a huge percentage that are mired in the day-to-day, and maybe don't have the luxury. That might have been how you put it, actually, before we went live. What's been in your experience over the course of your career, in who it is accessible to and or approachable to, and who it's not?
Well, it's and looking back on my career, and like I said, I'm at a great point now where I can focus on, while I'm still involved in projects, it's usually a very kind of broad level, and I have those moments to step back. As I said to you earlier before I got on there, I'm not sitting there spending months checking shop drawings where I have barely the time to do anything but to do that work. So when you get to sit back and look at it kind of holistically, I looked through the kind of history with my period of time, and there's always been a resistance, and it hasn't been a resistance because people aren't smart and they're not ambitious. Right. It's just, I believe, very hard because of the number of people that it takes to actually drive real change in the industry. What we do is an incredibly collaborative profession, and in whatever we're doing in the design and construction world. And to make change, you can't just do it just by with a couple of people saying, "Hey, let's do this." You need to get really buy-in from a broad range of stakeholders, everybody, the client, the architect, the engineer, the contractor, all the way through. And sometimes you can drive some things top down. But if you think of the biggest innovative change in the last 20 years, and it really was, I always kind of play it down because it wasn't as innovative as we made it out to be. As well, we went from analog to digital, starting 20 years ago. Everybody was, touting it as a big change in the industry, which it was, but it really wasn't true innovation because we were just adopting a technology that the aviation industry had done a decade or more before that. And I'd say it went forward in a kind of the traditional way in which we do things, where there were some true believers, they got on board and they did it, and they kind of dragged the rest of the industry forward until everybody said, okay, because there was always the resistance, why are we putting this into whatever platform that there was? Why should I spend all this extra money in training and everything else? It just works fine the way it is. But in that case, 20 years ago, we all were gravitating to one or two or three platforms. We were all, and when I say we, it was really more designers and to some degree contractors, and owners were seeing the benefit of it, but they really weren't necessarily driving the change unless it was the GSA or somebody who was putting forth those kinds of things. Today it's very different because I think it's really true innovation. It is new products and other things that are coming forward that are touching every aspect and every stakeholder, like I said before. And I think one of the things that make it less approachable, and I've been thinking about this for a while, is the fact that it's kind of like a fire hose of things coming at us. And you go to conferences sometimes, and it's actually, this came to me about a year ago when I was in a conference, and I sat there and I listened to all these different presentations, and it was like 100 over a couple of days. And at the end of the day, I'm saying, these all three fit into three categories, and it was process innovation, performance innovation, and product innovation. And I'm convinced that actually every time I see something new, I'm saying, all right, which one of those categories? And some of them fall into one or two. And I think if we started to think around it, I'm not saying those have to be the categories, but if we start to kind of bring them in there, because they're not all as easy to implement. I would say a product innovation is probably the easiest because we're kind of used to that. When a new product comes out in our industry and kind of we test it and we check the ROI and we do things, people will embrace it if it ticks the boxes, and it's easier to roll into the process and into what we do. And then performance innovation is probably kind of close to that, where it's really kind of, I call performance is where we're kicking the tires on data. All of these platforms that are out there that are helping us take all of this data since we've digitized what we do and make more sense out of it. And I think people have been, that's something that they can do. It may be an issue about changing the software they're using or training people, but it's something that they can get their hands around. But the third one, which is kind of process innovation, that's the real tricky one, because that's where you're actually, that's where you get back to this collaborative enterprise that we work in, that requires all the stakeholders to get on board and everybody to kind of reassess how they work, where they work, all of those things. And that's the ones when I see those companies or approaches, while I think they're the most exciting, I think they're the ones also that really take the most effort and the most thought to kind of really figure out how to implement them.
So when we think about the process in innovation, if we take that bucket specifically, you look at an organization like Thornton Tomasetti or anybody else that you're collaborating with or against for that matter, who's driving the process information? Is it a top down? Is it somebody in the middle? Is it somebody that says, hey, I need this to make my job better? Where do you see most of that being driven from?
Well, I think you see it at all levels of the life cycle of assets and with all people. I mean, I'll give you an example of a couple of companies that we've looked at. One, take a company like Assembly OSM or Falk Builder, the people who are looking at kind of modularizing the process. I mean, that is the biggest process change you can imagine, right? It's everything from how do you procure, what comes first, second, or third, how do you change the whole construction process, and those require a completely rethinking from everyone from the owner all the way down to labor and everything in between. But even ones that are hitting different parts of the life cycle, like I look at TestFit, which is that kind of AI enabled early stage planning and execution. It's really rethinking who needs to be in the room when you're laying out a new site, and can we do rapid prototyping quickly and without having to kind of assemble a whole team of designers and others. Can we put that in a way and make it, a tool that almost anybody can bring to the table to speed up or expand the way in which we evaluate opportunities. And then one that we've been involved with is, T2D2. This is a platform that we did where we're looking at exterior envelopes of buildings and using AI and just trying to rethink the way that you care for and manage those assets. There's a challenge because you've got to go to a building department that has a cycle and says, oh, we're going to check the buildings every 5 years. Well, is that the right way to really manage a building? Guess there's a lot of stuff happening in those cycles. So it's not just going in and changing. You have to change be part of the whole, kind of system as to how things are being managed and maintained. So I think those big process ones are really, and the resistance to change, as I said earlier. I've been reading a great book that actually was in a conference. I heard the professors who wrote the book from Northwestern University. It's called The Human Element, and it's about the friction that happens when you're trying to drive innovation. And they identify 4 areas: inertia, effort, emotion, and what they call reactance. And all 4 of them, some of those would be in different areas of resistance depending on the change. But if you're making a process change versus a performance or a product change, I think all 4 of those come into bear, because it's inertia is like, our industry, we've been doing it this way for years, and we have all of these, we have to get all these people on board to make the change. The effort is huge. Like I said, it's not just, hey, we'll bring in a new piece of software and train people, or we'll convince an owner that the ROI on this product is great and they should consider using it, right? It's a much bigger effort and lift to kind of change the process. The emotion of it all. I mean, this is what people, the way they work their whole careers, and you're suddenly saying, oh, no, you should work differently now. And then the last one they call reactance, which I would describe as, the issue that says, like, who are you to tell me what to do, right? Kind of that kind of approach. And there's a lot of that out there. Like, I've been doing this for years. I know better than you. It's like people who have the answer when you mention AI and they say, oh, I don't like artificial intelligence. I like real intelligence. And I'm like, oh, come on, please. All right, let's, but I get it, right? There's a reactance to, like, I'm resisting this because I recognize the challenge here. So I think, those, if we can break down make these different categories more approachable and say, we recognize there's a lot in the fire hose, but there's really not that many. There's really only 3 things we're changing. We're changing products, we're changing performance analytics, the way you approach that, and we're changing the process. And yes, and recognizing that this friction, this resistance is real, and how do we actually get people over those hurdles?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If all 4 of those things, if those are the frictions, which makes complete sense to me. And I think as you're describing it, I'm sort of thinking through examples in my head. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. It's the friction, and we talk all the time in different contexts about removing the friction. So how do we remove the friction in terms of innovation, right? In the way that you've talked about, is it mentioned in the book? I'll put the title and the authors up on the screen
they give
again.
lots of examples. Now, the book wasn't written around our industry, so there's a lot of examples outside of our industry which are great. And like I said, it's The Human Element. So that you Google it, you'll find it. It's easy and it's a quick read and good. But I say in our industry, I'd say, and let's start off with the hardest one, right? With the process innovation. If you recognize, to me, inertia is, you're going to have to deal with that regardless, right? And that, in some of that is really the firm, the people. Do you have 10 years ago or more, Thornton Tomasetti embraced the big goal to be the global driver of change and innovation in our industry, right? So when I look at inertia at our firm, I would say, all I have to do is talk to somebody and say, remember what our big goal was? Let's put that inertia aside, because our big goal is to drive innovation. So, get over yourself. We have to do this, right? But the other ones, effort, emotion, reactance, those aren't as easy to address. I think if you're a firm that says, hey, I want to do this, you could, or a company, and let's think about it. Who out there that's been successful says, no, I don't want to change. I want to stay exactly the way I was. So I think the inertia part is probably the easiest. You can just speak to people's inherent, at least, aspiration to change and be on top of things. But I think the other three, you can't minimize the effort. You can't minimize the emotion behind it. It's like, that this is really changing someone, the way they've worked, how they define themselves and the value they bring to the table. I mean, look at test fit, right? You're saying to somebody, well, thank you. You lay out parking garages, but I'm going to use this tool that can do it in a fraction of the time. I'll come back to you when I have a pretty good layout, and I'll ask you to weigh in at that point. That's a real threat to somebody who's said, no, 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 I know how to lay out parking garage. That's I've done that in my career, right? And so I think recognizing those things and actually starting the conversation with the people who are not going away, we're augmenting what they're doing. Now, I don't see any of the talent going away. I use this, the example I give is the old one, years ago when I'm so old that, spreadsheets showed up. And I used to do, the calculations by hand, and suddenly, spreadsheets showed up, and my boss, Charlie Thornton and Richard Tomasetti, I started being able to do things quicker. And because I was using a spreadsheet, that wasn't cheating. That wasn't like, and if I wasn't using it, it was silly. These tools they just allowed me to be more efficient. They freed up my time for kind of more creative parts of what I was doing. And I think that's the conversation we have to have is like, if you love to just sit there and crunch numbers, great. But if I'm giving you a tool that actually allows you to do that quicker and then, kind of, solve the problem or look at different solutions, I think that's what most people really enjoy. So I think it's a conversation with all the stakeholders, and it's recognizing that these issues around these categories, like I said, product innovation, I think it's about just finding people and making the ROI argument. Process innovation, it's just how do we not embrace the fact that we now have this data, and we have to actually, there's tools out there that'll let us address that, how that data can actually make us more efficient. But the process ones are the ones that I think we have to sit with people and recognize that their resistance is not just, kind of being obstinate. It's built into the fact that we're human.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what struck me as you were explaining that is there's a mindset shift, right? In order for us to, there's this approach, the idea of approachability, obviously, but it's going to require a mindset shift for some. Some are, we've talked about that already. Some are on board, some are champions of change, and some are threatened, and probably everything in between. And so there will be a mindset shift probably with some that's required in order to buy in, get the buy-in, get the
And
embracing
some
the
don't have
tools.
the time, like we talked about it earlier. I mean, we're
Yeah,
sitting here, and the luxury of being able to sit here and carve out in the middle of my day time to have a
yeah,
conversation about this with you is
yeah,
a luxury that I didn't have 20 years ago, or even probably 10
right,
years ago,
yeah,
right? And recognizing that, you have to have the time no matter where in your career, but you can't assume that people have it at the moment you want to engage with them. If somebody's got a
that's a
deadline
good
at my
point.
firm, and they have to, and on Friday they're getting the model out to the client, or they're meeting a deadline, it's not my time to go approach them about some
Yeah,
innovation, or some technology or some idea of changing the whole process in the way that they work, right? You have to find those moments. Maybe it's at the beginning of a new job where you say, hey, let's step back for a second. We're starting a new project. Let's think about what we can bring to bear. Can we change the process here? Is there a new product we can bring to the client? Is there something we can do with data that's going to allow this new project to move in a different direction? Are we heading into construction and we want to where are the moments where you can step in, where those other barriers, the ideas of effort, emotion, and reactance maybe are a little lower because the people have the time. But I know there are moments, if somebody came by my desk and tried to bring something to me, I'd look up at them and go, get out of here. I'm like, I don't have time for this, right? This is all cool
yeah.
stuff, Tom, but I've got a deadline to meet and profits to make. So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's an excellent point. A few weeks ago, I talked with Ty Nguyen from Hensel Phelps and Diverge about the culture of innovation, and it strikes me as we're having this conversation. We need to plug the two of you together into one of these conversations because it's so important what you're talking about, what Ty was talking about, and there's things that you're bringing up. And I think that approachability and the timing of it is a really, really important point. So I really appreciate you spending this time in the middle of the day. Like you said, it's a luxury that you have and I have that not everybody Not everybody has. So this has
Well,
been
I
a
mean,
great
I'll give a
conversation.
pitch for you. I'll give you a pitch for your summits as well. I think, I mean, there's so many summits and so many conversations out there. But I think part of that is also that when can you break out and have engage and have
Mm,
those kind of conversations? And I think, again, we need to have more people who can find the time for those, and we have to make sure that those times we get together are valuable, because once you break, if you take some time out of your busy calendar to take the time to think about this, it has to be, kind of crafted in a way. That's why I was saying, the idea that, to think about what are these big buckets of ideas, and trying to make it approachable. Because if you walk away from a conversation, whether it's a summit or a call like this, and you say, okay, I now have more tools to be able to approach this. That to me would
yeah,
be the goal. Whether there was anything that jumped out as a particular solution that you embrace, that's great. But I think it's really about more, how do you walk away from these conversations with some tools on how do you bring them to your organization or to your project or to your client or whatever it happens to be. Um,
yeah, yeah. That's an excellent point. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And if you're listening and or watching and you're wondering what's the summit that Tom's talking about, I put the URL in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. It's shadowsummit.com is the website for our summit that's coming up. It's the seventh annual Shadow Summit this year. It's in Atlanta, October 24th through 26th. And we're going to have conversations like this. We go deep in the weeds. It's called a summit for a reason. It's conversations. It's a time for us to really think about and set the agenda for innovation for the built environment in 2024. It's not your typical conference. It's not your CEU learning unit time. It's a time for us to really embrace innovation, and it's a time to think about these ideas like approachability. So shadowsummit.com is where you can find more info on that. There's an apply button towards the top of that page. So thanks for bringing that up, Tom.
yeah.
If you want to
Well,
know
I
more,
think I think it'll be really interesting, because you think of, just what's happened in the last year, what's happened in the last 6 months.
yeah,
Large language models suddenly landed, right? And I think
yeah,
have added a whole other stream to this conversation
right,
that didn't exist 6 months ago. I mean, this is why I said the breadth and speed of what's happening.
yeah,
And it's not, I don't believe it's necessarily its own category. I think it filters into all three of those categories. Process change, you can bring it into process, you can bring it into
hmm,
products, you can bring it into performance. But I think if you're not paying attention to the large language model revolution, you're going to miss something. And you're not, unlike the digitization of what we did 20 years ago, you're not going to have 5 or 10 years to catch up.
right,
You're going to have a year or two, and if you ignore it, you're going to be ignoring it at your peril. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that finds its way into a summit like yours, where it wasn't
hmm,
even in the conversation a year ago.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent point. And as you will not be surprised to learn, we will have a whole panel on generative AI and how AI is and machine learning as well as is impacting shaping the shaping of the built environment, and you know that's everything from marketing to deliverables and everything in between. So yeah, look for that. And the book that Tom has referenced is the Human Element by Laura Nordgren and David Schonthal. And that's up in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now. If you want to go to Amazon or wherever you buy books, you can look for that. So, Tom, thanks a lot. This has been a fun conversation. It's been an important conversation, and we'll have to dig into it more in the future. I appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jeff, and look forward to talking more. And for others, people who are out there, love to have the conversation. Like I said, I have the luxury and the passion for it, just like you do, Jeff. And so look forward to talking to other industry folks who are as passionate about this and trying to make it more approachable. I think if we all get together, we'll be able to do that, because this is going to require a team effort to make this happen. And I think the whole industry is going to have to embrace it. What's nice is we're seeing that. We're really seeing
Yeah,
leadership
yeah,
step
I
up
think
at
you're right.
every level of all the major firms, competitors, and others. That it's really exciting to see for the first time, I think, in my career, where you see the industry really stepping up and embracing this. But it's going to require a lot of people getting together and figuring out how to get rid of that friction and move forward. So
Yeah,
hopefully this has been a little bit of help in that conversation.
Absolutely. I think you've got the ball rolling. So I appreciate that. If you want to connect with Tom, he's approachable. ThorntonTomasetti.com is the URL for the Thornton Tomasetti website. But Tom is also on LinkedIn, and you can find him
And
around
you
the.
can email me at tzs@thorntontomasetti.com. Easy
There
enough.
you
Yeah, Scarangello is a long one, so I took a shorter one to throw it in there. So
go. Very good. All right. Again, thank you. And for those of you out there that are listening, thank you for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow with another Shadow Short, and we'll continue talking about innovation for the built environment. Till then, have a great day. Tom, thanks again. Appreciate you. And we'll see everybody tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And every weekday, I bring to you a conversation with an expert, a thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. And today, I am joined by, we were just having a great conversation backstage. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, not only from a doer, but also a thinker. We're going to get into a lot of, I think, a lot of thoughts about what the way things should be, but also how things are. So I'm joined today by Roger Krulak. He is the founder and CEO of FullStack Modular, and FullStack Modular just moved to Connecticut, but Roger's joining us from New York today. Roger, thanks for joining me. Glad to have you here.
Jeff, so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation and looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Before we went live, we were talking about this disintegration of construction, and there's so many things that we bounce back and forth, and I think you're right on. But when we think about disintegration of construction, what do you think about? What are you seeing out there, and then what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I mean, the word is interesting and provocative. I mean, disintegration. But what I mean by disintegration doesn't mean that it's all disappearing, which it may one day. But what I'm talking about is that we have created a system by which our design does not manifest, is not planned and organized in a process that is logical or timely or organized in a way that most everything else that is created in the world, manufactured, is. So we now have, architecture as a subset of what goes into the built environment, and then we have mechanical engineering and structural engineering and civil engineering. The reality is it's all one thing, and it's not organized from a process perspective in any way that we've divided it. So what happens is we've divided it into 16 subsections, and all of the professionals that are involved in it, which we need, in a way that is completely disorganized and disintegrated, meaning that the pieces and parts are not organized in a way that allows any kind of industrialized construction or manufacturing in a logical fashion. So what we try to do at FullStack is to embrace the built environment and try to move it into an industrialized construction process.
And when we were talking before, I mean, we touched on housing. I mean, that's a big issue, as we know. We were talking about housing at universities, workforce housing, et cetera. What do you think when you think about modular construction, or you think about industrialized construction, whether that means robotics or there's lots and lots of different layers and avenues for that. But what do you think is the greatest impact possible, or maybe flip it around? What's the greatest need? But when we think about this, what's out there on the horizon that we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the big picture, it's pretty clear, right? In the U.S., depending on whose statistics you read, we're roughly 7 million housing units short in the United States. And it varies as to location, et cetera. But we talked about doesn't matter who you talk to. If you talk to the government of California or San Francisco or New York or Raleigh, North Carolina, or New London, Connecticut, the problem is we're lacking housing. We're lacking housing stock, and our population is growing. And there is a huge effort to sort of move manufacturing back to the United States. And as a result of that, workers need to be here, and they need to be proximately located to where they're going. Or, you want to go to a university, chances are you don't want to sleep in a tent or in a hotel. At the same time, like, you can just Google articles on like housing needs for colleges all over the United States. They're not there. So we are failing as an industry to provide the market's needs. And so the question is why? And the need and the opportunity, I think, is the question you asked, which is what can industrialized construction do for this problem? And what it can do is it can create an efficient process to create product to meet the needs of the markets that you're talking about. That's what it can do. What it can't do is it can't speed up permitting. It can't speed up, financing of these things. It can't provide the potential deficit created by the current methodology of creating, say, for instance, affordable housing. It can't fix all of those financial engineering problems, but what it can do is it can provide an opportunity to have predictable costs, greater throughput, quality, sustainability, improved workforce, less of a need for specialized trades, et cetera, so forth. They can do all of those things, but it's not a magic cure for all of the woes that we have as a country as it relates to housing needs. But it is a tool that is growing in use, and it's growing in use out of necessity. There is no way we're ever going to catch up with the current methodology for creating projects. When you think about I think about the current affordable housing game plan. It is fee focused. The people who do it incredibly well, but the reality is that the building at the end of the day has no value, at least for 25 years. And is it sustainable to think about building buildings in environments where the asset has no value or very small value because it's been, literally the revenue associated with it doesn't cover the costs of operating it. And they're paying fees on top of that in order to manage it, which they have to do because it needs to be managed and it's complicated. So, we have so much to fix sort of beyond industrialized construction. At the same time, it is a tool that is utilized in everything that's, we basically use on a daily basis, except the built environment. Sure, and everything that goes in, I'm just going to take one more thing because I'm waxing, big picture. The reality is that almost everything that goes into the built environment is manufactured, but the built environment is not.
It's an interesting paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're talking about or questioning the sustainability of the building having no value, et cetera, is there an impact? We'll just take modular construction as a subset of industrialized construction. Is there an impact when a building is designed for modular, when a building is constructed through modular and in the factory and then assembled on site, et cetera? Is there an impact on that sustainability, that sustainability question that you raised simply by using modular construction?
I would say that it's an opportunity for all of that. So the interesting thing about building in a factory is everything is inspected, right? It's not like 10% or 3% or whatever it is. B, you can choose what you're using in the building in a way that is much harder to do on, in a conventional, design, bid, build process, because in a design, bid, build process, you're buying out basically all of the materials plus engineering of, some described performance criteria that you've created, and then you sort of leave it to the electrical contractors or the mechanical contractors to give you whatever they can for the price that you agreed to pay, in a way that's going to obviously not necessarily be accretive to the value of engineering, et cetera. And we as a country, and frankly as an industry, have created methodologies in order to try to measure those. LEED, ILFI, just a whole bunch of them. And the question is the methodology yielding? And I don't have an answer for that. I'm not the sustainable engineer, but I can tell you that what we can do in a modular situation is we know where we're buying stuff from. We know the source. We know we can do all kinds of things to track the effectiveness of that sustainability, and we can do it in a way that is concerted, and even because we've had a number of conversations with the Department of Energy, et cetera, we can buy it all made in America. Like, that's really hard to do in a conventional construction project. But if you say to FullStack, it needs to all come from the US of A, we can do that, and that's not so easy. It actually, they haven't even funded a conventional project because they can't figure out how to ensure that everything comes from the US, but we have that opportunity. So the fact that we're utilizing a manufacturing process allows a lot more flexibility and ability to adhere to sort of sustainability efforts on every level.
So what's the one question that is not being asked enough about either modular or take it, to the 30,000 foot industrialized construction? What are we not really talking about or asking about that we should be?
I don't know if it's an asking about rather than embracing the fact. I mean, okay. So to me, the issue is that we are pretty, as a society, pretty unrealistic about what the state of the nation is, right? And the state of the industry is. And the reality is that even though, construction is 13.5% of the world economy, and it's not keeping up either here or anywhere else in the world, I think the conversation is not how do we solve the problem and what do we use as tools. The whole system for creating it is obviously broken. And the question is what do we do to fix that, and what tools can we use for it? And I think that's the conversation that's not happening. And modular industrialized construction is one piece of it. It's not the only piece of it. There's a lot of pieces. But it's the conversations I have with development teams and architects, et cetera. I mean, it's a huge conversation. I go speak all over the place, but still, the amount of people that are actually listening, they're going to have to, and they are, but they're really not. They're not embracing it in a way that is valuable. Although you do hear, I hear about a developer who's going to start their own modular company every day, and I wish them all luck. And I think the more, we have unachievable market need. So the more that happens, the better it is. I hope they all succeed, but I do think that the questions the questions that normally get asked are relatively uninteresting. I mean, for instance, like the quality of modular construction. Go to the factory and take a look. I mean, and then go to a high rise being built in, I hate to pick on it, Fort Lauderdale, because I was just there. Really? I'm not watching the building. The concrete is so out of square and so not plumb, and I'm sure the floors aren't flat, and they're going up like Mayan ruins as a precursor. And I mean, of course, that's not all the things, but it is noticeably problematic. The quality of construction that's going in, you can see it. And at the end of the day, I'm sure it's going to be beautiful and it'll be fine. I'm not saying they won't be safe, but it is astounding to me as somebody who sort of grew up in the construction business and great grandfather was a carpenter to watch it's scary. It's a little scary. So, the idea of being able to have a quality assurance program and check everything that's going in and making sure that it's dimensionally accurate and that all of the systems are organized in a way that is understandable, achievable, and follow and possible to follow. It doesn't. It's not. It's not happening. It's not happening, and we should be thinking about that.
Well, and I think another question that people ask, and we run into this when we talk about robotics and construction and 3D printing and construction, other avenues, if you will, or other areas of industrialized construction. And it's not unique to construction, obviously, but what about the people? What about the jobs? Is this robot going to replace X number of people from the workforce? When we talk about, your world specifically, modular, what's and this is a big question, right? Because it's not only jobs, but it's beyond, but what's the impact on jobs when it comes to modular?
Yeah, it's such a good question. You still need people to build the environment. I mean, to me, look, automation is a process, and it's not necessarily robots. Like automation is a process. Like, how do we organize this, what already we've mentioned, disintegrated process into something that is much more integrated? And once it is integrated, are there opportunities to increase productivity? And the answer to that is yes. With AI and robotics and automation, there is an opportunity to increase productivity. So now I like to look at the two things that I've said. Well, one thing I've said and one thing that I sort of had mentioned, which is the need 7 million units of deficit. I don't care if you get 3 times more productive, you still don't have anywhere near the productivity needed in order to meet the problem. And in addition to that, one of the biggest complaints that you hear, whether it's true or not, from government officials or affordable housing builders is it's too expensive to build to meet the So what if you can increase productivity of an individual that makes a very good living wage at $50 an hour or $75,000 a year or $100,000 a year and can afford a place to live, et cetera. Now you can't decrease the costs of that construction by exporting it because you have now defeated the process, right? And the purpose and bringing back. However, if you can increase the productivity of that person by threefold, then you're not eliminating jobs. You're increasing productivity to meet the market needs. So I think if you're talking about an isolated economy where you've closed off the market, maybe you can preserve jobs, but we can see sort of what's happened to every industry that tries to do that, right? So in my mind, it's an opportunity to do exactly the opposite of what they're claiming, which is you're going to take away people's jobs. You're not. You're actually creating people's jobs, or it's all coming from Thailand, or China, or China. This is an opportunity. We should be embracing it because it's a good thing to do, but also because it's valuable, right? So I'm not worried about. I want to be retired long before the day when we have too much productivity to meet the market need. But we are so far from that that should be our last. And by the way, everybody else is doing it. So we're in a world economy. We can't pretend we're here by ourselves anymore. So and if we do, it's going to be pretty bad. So I think that we've sort of, it behooves us to be intelligent about how we do all this stuff. And it's much easier, frankly, to do in a factory than it is to do on a construction site, even though there is plenty of construction site technology that is helping a bunch of things, safety and speed and tracking and all of those things. It's doing incredibly well. In a factory, it's much easier. Integrating technology is pretty simple.
Yeah. We get at Shadow Partners, the questions that we get when we're we're advising companies, et cetera. Industrialized construction is one of the big, I would say, top three topics that we were asked about. Of course, AI is actually that'll come out in tomorrow's newsletter. Talking about AI, but industrialized construction is a big topic of conversation. People wanting to know about it, how to get involved with it, the impact, and and beyond. So this is a really timely and interesting conversation. And I would say if you're watching this right now or listening to this right now, you say, "Hey, I want to know more. I want to know more about industrialized construction. I want to know more about modular construction." The first thing you ought to do is go to fullstackmodular.com. That's the website for Roger's company, fullstackmodular.com, and learn more about what they're doing, and maybe reach out to Roger, find out more about how they're working. And then the other thing I would say is that if you want to go deeper into conversations like this, later this year in October, the 24th through 26th in Atlanta, we're going to have our 7th annual Shadow Summit. That's what we call it. It's a time to get together and talk about problems and figure out problems and set an agenda for moving forward. So shadowsummit.com is where you can find out more about the summit. Tickets are going quickly, and it is a purposefully intimate affair. There are only 200 seats in the auditorium, so those will quickly run out. But you can apply for a ticket at shadowsummit.com, and we will certainly have conversations and a panel on industrialized construction at Shadow Summit this year. Roger, this has been a real eye-opening conversation, and this is another one of those that I would love to continue this for about an hour, but we call this Shadow Short, so we'll have to wrap it up. But thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for sharing your thoughts and your experience here.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate the conversation and looking forward to continuing it whenever you are available.
All right. That sounds good. I appreciate it. And for all of you out there, thanks for joining us today. I'll be back tomorrow with another conversation from an expert or thought leader in the realm of industrialized construction. This, I was telling Roger as we were getting ready to get started, I was looking at our guest list for this week. It looks like a lot of conversation about change and leadership and change management. So a lot of the people side of the equation this week. So I'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern with our next Shadow Short. Until then, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.